Hello everyone, it's Melanie here with Vintage Hill Studio. I'm so glad you could join me today. We'll be making this cute little sewing card in honor of all the seamstresses out there. That is not me, but I appreciate people who can sew. We'll be using these two papers and the Sizzix sewing and writing set, which are Sizzlit dies. Here's a look at the die that will cut out the scissors. I'll be running that through my Sizzix Big Shot machine, and here is the result. The details in these are really fantastic. So there's that little set screw that goes on your scissors. I'll take out some of these components that were die cut. Just jiggle this a little bit and these center pieces will pop right out. Okay, so there's the beginning of our scissors. Next I'll work on this spool using a little bit of a brownish cardstock to cut out the spool. Can see the edges have a little detail there. And then also the needle and thread. Now I chose just to cut out the needle and I'll cut away those pieces of thread. So with these Sizzlits you can either do what I'm doing and use cardstock, or you can use white cardstock and color in your own images. But I chose to kind of piece these together. So here I'm going to take that top part, the fancy part of the scissors there. I like that. I wanted to cut out another piece because if you look at the packaging, it looks like they've colored in their pieces, but I'm piecing mine together with these different colors of cardstock, and I wanted to add a little dimension and detail. So I'm just cutting apart pieces and parts of the scissors to get that dimension. So see what I'm talking about right here, that detail in the fancy part of the scissors? I'm going to accomplish that by running that through an embossing folder. I chose this Camilla lace folder because it has really fine details, and this is such a small piece that I need those fine details in order for it to show up at all. So I'll run that through my favorite little Sizzix Texture Boutique, emboss that tiny little piece of my scissors, and I hope you can see the detail on the video. I think you'll be able to see this. Just gives it a little bit of an impression, kind of like the packaging shows. And when I adhere that on my scissors, it'll look like this. Alright, moving along. I wanted to also do the handles in a different color. And I chose orange that I think will show up well against my pattern paper background. So I'll get that removed and do a little scissor surgery here in order to round out those handles so they fit perfectly on the foundation of my scissor image. So that'll go there. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Then I'll take that embossed fancy piece, adhere that right there, and then the last detail for the scissors is this little set screw, which will go right in the center. Okay, moving back to my spool, I take a little adhesive, and again I'm working on my silicone mat. This is a microwave mat from a big box store. Your adhesives and your liquid, whether it's liquid or tape runners, will not stick to your silicone mat, which makes it great for working on little details like this spool. So I did put tape adhesive on the front and back to kind of hold. This is just a fine crewel yarn right here. You can use thread, use whatever you like. I just like the weight of this yarn and I had scraps. So by putting adhesives on the front and back, it helps hold that yarn. Next is my little needle, and you can see I cut away the thread that the die cut provides. And I'm just threading it by putting a little bit of tape around my yarn. Okay, now moving on to the card. The base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and so is the mat out of my pattern paper. It just goes edge to edge. And then I'm going to use a little piece of this ruler paper. I thought that was cute. And this is a double-sided pattern paper, so I'm going to cut a couple of ovals from the Spellbinders Fancy Edge oval dies out of the blue, and then on the flip side is a greenish grid. I get my 2 ovals cut out. I'll get those adhered together, and that will go on the front of my card as a base for my detailed scissors, thread, and needle. Because I don't want them to get lost on the busy background, so I thought the ovals would help them stand out a bit. Get that put down on the front of my card and start adding the finer details. It's coming along just fine. Okay. I used some packaging that I received some cookies in, and it's really a good weight silver cardstock for this, so why not reuse it? Get those scissors adhered down. Next I'll add the spool, and I really concentrate on putting the my liquid adhesive over the yarn, because the tops and bottoms of the spool really don't hit once the yarn is on there. Okay, now this little needle and what's supposed to look like thread. I clipped off that end where I had wound some tape around there so I could get it through the eye of the needle. Get my needle adhered down onto my card front, and then I'm going to speed this up as I go along, trying to get this crewel embroidery yarn attached to the front of my card. And I'm not attaching it from end to end, I'm just putting little glue dots here and there and holding it till the tacky glue dries just a bit. And you'll see why I don't adhere the whole thread, because I'm going to slip my little sentiment under a part of that thread. I'll snip off the excess. And then the next step is that I did not have any stamps specifically for sewing, so I just printed a sentiment out on my computer. And I'm using the Memory Box Rectangles die, the smallest one I have, to cut that out. And then to add a little detail, I'll take my fine tip Sharpie and go around the edges and add my own stitching. There are rectangles that have stitching already on them, but mine were not small enough for this sentiment. So that's why I used a plain rectangle die, and I'm adding my own stitching. All right. And you can see I'm going to slip that right under part of my thread there. Add a little bit of foam tape to the back and adhere that to the front of my card. And we're almost done, just need to move on to the inside of the card. I'll be using Stampendous birthday wish stamps for the inside. And again, I pulled some of that pattern paper, the double-sided paper, cut an oval, have my stamp there, and finish the inside of the card. So here is our completed card. The front, the inside sentiment, my personalized back stamp, and our finished lined envelope. I use the Tim Holtz Sewing Cling Stamps to add a little embellishment to the outside of my envelope, and we are done. I hope you enjoyed this video, that you get inspired to give it a try. Again, this is in honor of all of my seamstress friends who I admire so much, and it was so much fun to make and came along pretty quickly. Come back and see me sometime, and happy crafting, everyone!